China sanctions Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker of the House. But that's weird. She's a CCP insider. She's got a club member. Her lobbyists for her cabinet are actually in bed with Ant Group, which is trying to import the vaccine passports, right? The Chinese social credit system, and enslave Americans. Digital prison, people. It's coming. You can thank Nancy Pelosi. So again, in my opinion, this is all show. It's all a misdirection. Pelosi, in my opinion, is firmly in bed with communist China. But that's not all. Our government in D.C. loves America. Come on. Well, some Americans. Only if you play ball. How about the FBI coming up with a kind of a domestic terrorist hit list or icon list or whatever you want to call it? But what's strange is Ted Cruz yesterday kind of like deconstructed that list and said, hey, Betsy Ross flag's on here. What's up with that? Why is that a symbol of domestic terror? How about Ted Cruz's boots? He has some kind of icon on the back of his boots. He had to take it off and show everybody, hey, I wear these boots. I wear this symbol. It has nothing to do with domestic terrorists, right? But it gets better. Then, of course, they're listing the old famous false flags, the Ruby Ridge, which was carried out by the ATF, DHS, CIA, whoever carried out that in 1992. 30 years ago. 29 years ago, they carried out Waco, Texas, right? Branch Davidians. But what, or COVIDians, no, it's Davidians. But what's amazing about that particular thing, the CIA used Waco to bring in Tim McVeigh, a U.S. Army veteran, Special Forces, to bring him in to turn him against the government. But what would McVeigh do 2 years when he became the Lee Harvey Oswald of Oklahoma City bombing? Oh, he'd become the patsy, the fall guy, right? So they brought a Ryder truck and blew up half the building, but the same amount of ammonium nitrate used over in Oslo in 2011 only blew up the glass. How do you blow up half the building? Same government, concrete slab building, I'm in construction, right? Blown half of it apart, and it also only had cosmetic damages on the glass, like breaking sunglasses versus breaking bones. How did that happen? Oh, I'll tell you how that happened. Because they had detonation. They had 3 bombs that at least went off inside a building. It's sort of like a 9/11 kind of thing, precursor, right? And McVeigh was blamed for everything. But more importantly, in that building, the government was smart. The Clintons were smart because it was President Clinton's time in office, right? First term. What did? They brought in all the Agent Orange records from Vietnam vets. Then they brought in all the Gulf War records for Gulf War syndrome, right? The anthrax vaccine, right? All of the adjuvants in there, all that synthetic stuff that actually created Gulf War syndrome. Oh, and they brought in the Clinton's Whitewater records. Everything got miraculously, conveniently destroyed in one explosion, which McVeigh didn't do on his own. Sorry. No one's buying that crap. And the question is, was the FBI involved in Oklahoma City bombing in 1995? Well, when we win, and we're going to win, we're going to learn about FBI's roles in a lot of things. A lot of things. Right? It's not just the CIA. There's basically every part of our government has been weaponized to a great degree. So here to break down this art of lawfare, because we're in a war now. We're in an information war. We're in a law war. They're trying to redo everything. The FBI, right? They're redefining recession. Biden administration redefining vaccines, redefining even monkeypox. Putting shingles and herpes on there. Well, shingles and herpes, we know, is an adverse event by the FDA on the COVID bioweapons called vaccines. Oh, so you see how this game's played? So a lot of the monkeypox now being declared by the HHS, it's a complete farce. This is our time to really wake up. So with Josh Reed and myself, we have our guest, local guest, Sarasota County, who's fighting the common law. His name is Robert Kraft. He's also a philosopher. Fantastic, very imaginative guy, and actually knows how to read and apply the real laws of the people and not the Bar Association laws from bloody England, right? So time to take a deep dive on DEFCON 5. Let's roll.
Doctor, we got to talk about polio. What do you make of this? What do you make of this news report?
Well, look, in this case, the sequencing that was done by Wadsworth Center, that's the New York State Public Health Lab, and it was confirmed by CDC, it showed that it was what we call polio type 2 virus. So this is a vaccine-induced infection from the oral polio vaccine, which isn't used here in the U.S. What's unclear is whether or not this individual, a 20-year-old male, they haven't reported any more details, contracted that here in the U.S. or overseas. There was some reporting in the Washington Post that he had recently traveled to Hungary and Poland, which suggests he may have gotten it out of the country. But CDC has to have a theory of the case in terms of the sequence of when he traveled and when he became ill, and they haven't put that out. So it makes me a little suspicious whether or not he got that here or overseas. One thing worth noting is the oral polio vaccine isn't used widely around the world. The place where it's being used right now is in Ukraine because they are experiencing an outbreak of vaccine-derived polio virus. So they've been vaccinating children with the oral polio virus. It's possible that people who migrated out of Ukraine into Poland and Hungary brought some cases into those countries, and perhaps this individual contracted it there, because you're just not seeing a lot of this around the world right now. So it's unclear where he got it. The risk, of course, is that he might have contracted it here in the U.S. from a child who maybe traveled from overseas, and there could be other cases, and that's why you're seeing an effort in Rockland County to get more people vaccinated. Final point I'll make, this particular county has had a low vaccination rate historically in recent years. They had a very big outbreak of measles. I think 312 kids were affected with measles between 2018 and 2019. So there is risk in this particular region of the country.
Yeah, Rockland County, New York. The county north and west and across the Hudson River from Westchester County, where I grew up above New York City. Born and raised there. Rockland County, very, very interesting. Yeah, that's where the Orthodox Jews refuse to vaccinate their children, and the measles outbreak completely blown out of proportion, and they're trying to break down these family units, and so they're using vaccines to do it. This is how the game's been played. Don't worry, it all ties into COVID-19 and everything else that's been going on. So I know that story very well. I love how he dropped a red pill there. Gottlieb, the former FDA director or commissioner, under President Trump, first term, right? What did Gottlieb just say? Oh, it's a vaccine-derived polio. It's not the wild polio. And it's coming out of children in Ukraine. So they're vaccinating children in Ukraine in the middle of a war or conflict, right? I mean, it's supposed to be the greatest war in history, the deadliest war ever, and they're vaccinating kids. What? Wait, what? Get out of the country. What is the CDC in there for? Vaccinated children, or is it Bill Gates' group? I mean, it's just totally crazy what's going on. This is James Grunberg, your host for UT's version of DEF CON 5 with my co-host Josh Reed on American Media Periscope. Right? We're here, Josh, right? ampnews.us. And this show is brought to you by our lead sponsor, Kirk Elliott, PhD, Private Advisors. Let's go to do some local news here instead of national news or international news. Let's go to image number 1. Oh, Sarasota's got some issues. Florida Supervisor of Election issues COVID-19 voting procedures that appear to challenge Florida law. You can't make this up. The voting in Florida, particularly in Sarasota County, is the 23rd of August, 18 days away, and already there's 4,000 ballots being missing or something to that effect. In Sarasota County, it's 450,000. So how many actual registered voters are there in there? What? I don't know, 100,000, 150,000? 4,000 could be a potentially big number. This is interesting. Let's go to image 2, though, because there is always good news. Oh, there it is. Her name's Kari Lake. She has won Arizona, right? Overwhelming. She exposed the fraud plus won. And how she won is she had massive turnout for the primaries, and she crushed the opposition. So now, boom, here we go. It's getting interesting because I guess that's the way conservatives are going to respond. Push out the rhinos, push out the establishment, liberals, and vote en masse. Josh, what are your thoughts on this type of voting?
Well, you know what, James, this is exactly what we need to do. We need to be very, very vigilant at these ballot boxes, these drop-off boxes. We know that they're going to cheat. The new speculation on the street is that they're going to try to just steal the Senate. If they can control the Senate, they can really control both houses from that point of view. And so we need to be incredibly vigilant. And what happened to Kari Lake is she was down by 9% at midnight on election night to Robson. And it doesn't, honestly, if we remember election night in 2020, it doesn't make sense
Yep.
she comes back and wins unless something happened. And we have speculation to believe that Arizona has a good old boys club like many of these other states where the GOP and the Dems, they don't care. They just control the power, they control the votes, and they allocate it who they want to allocate it to. And we know Kerry Lake had, let's just say people watching, and they had ample evidence. They had very, very hawkeyes on this election. And I think that they made a call in the middle of the night and said, look, we got you guys. If you do this, we're going to release it all.
Jail, baby.
Yep, I think they caught him, and all of a sudden, she wins the next day. So I think they tried to steal it there in Arizona, and she called them out and showed them the evidence, and there was nothing they could do about it except for give her the primary.
Yeah, amazing. So dive into your stuff today, because you're going to touch on the FBI, but you're going to start off in China, aren't you?
We're going to start off in China because this is going to be, when it happens, not if, when it happens, a global crisis. So China has been feared to launch a Pearl Harbor-style strike on the U.S. forces over Taiwan. Now, this is interesting. This is a U.S. thesun.com article that was published. We're seeing all different types of rhetoric coming from the mainstream media of China attacking Taiwan and taking out U.S. forces. Now, this rings true because if you remember the leaked audio, which I have just reiterated it over and over and over and over again, China said in this leaked audio, their generals, that they would utilize DF-41, which can be nuclear potential missiles, to take out any U.S. military blockades, U.S. naval blockades of the island. Now, there was an article that came out yesterday of another media show talking about how the U.S. Navy would win within Taiwan. And I'm a 10-year United States Navy veteran. I'm a student of history of naval battles, of warfare, and there is absolutely zero chance that the U.S. Navy can actually win within the South Pacific against China on their own homeland. It's just not going to happen. China will roll over Taiwan within 12 hours. The naval response that we have in that area, the military Air Force response that we have in that area, is not a large enough force to actually fend off a Chinese incursion. It's defensive in its posture and nature, and they would be on it. And I hate to say it like this, they would be wiped out immediately, and there would be nothing they can do. I think what's actually happening right now is the 4 days of drills is really an ultimatum to Taiwan and the United States. And I think that there's back channel communication going on right now between China and Taiwan, telling Taiwan to just give it up, lay it down, let us come in, and it's over, kick the United States out. Let's do this peacefully. Because China doesn't amass this much military force overnight because Pelosi all of a sudden decides to go to Taiwan. This takes months of planning, of strategy, and massive amounts of funding to put together 4 days of these types of drills where they're putting 40 battalions, 5,000 troops per battalion, 200,000 people on their coastal provinces. This isn't a drill. This is getting ready for an attack to invade Taiwan. That's what we're seeing right now. And this should concern everybody because this is the black swan event that we potentially were all waiting for. And this gives the Biden administration the ability to declare a national emergency, martial law, all these other things if China goes into Taiwan and American military forces are affected and potentially war is even declared. I doubt war will be declared. I think the United States will curtail and get out of there and allow China to just operate in there, which they'll control all the trade routes. They'll control all the trade and production. 84% of all exports come from China. 72% of the world chipset comes from Taiwan, which means that China would now control the global trade, which means that it's simply a war of attrition. World War III doesn't have to be fired with any kinetic aspects of it. And I think that, if this did come about, I don't know the scenarios that'll play out. I don't know how the United States would react to China's forward aggression into Taiwan. We do know that Russia most likely would move into Europe From this point, we have Serbia and Kosovo destabilization occurring that is being sponsored by Russia. We know Russia wants to move into these former Soviet states and take them back. And I think that we could see that happening. Now we also have the Gaza Strip and Israel going at it again. Iran is most likely behind this, going to get involved at some point. We're going to see destabilization in Eastern Europe, in the Middle East, in the South China Sea. And this is the advent to bring about World War III. I don't like to be a bearer of doom and gloom, but this is just what we're seeing by watching the narrative unfold. And with all that, we can see the United States government actually enacting certain restrictions here at home. We could potentially see martial law, especially with the economic decline, the global collapse of the economy that occurs from this. If China invades Taiwan, we will see a massive market pullback, recession, depression type style event, black swan event, as we talked about. When this does happen, we see things like, I don't know if you guys remember these, COINTELPRO, Rex 84, Main Core, Directive 51. These are where these levels of implementation come about, where the government starts attacking government dissenters. Now, I want you to listen to this right here. This is former Green Beret Delta Force member Mike Glover. Listen to this video. It's just a few minutes long, but this is incredibly important to understand the approach that the FBI, the DHS are taking in the weaponized form by the Democrats towards patriots like you and me. Let's listen to this.
Hey guys, Mike Glover here. If you haven't realized already, by now, Project Veritas came out with some damning information through an FBI leak of American Contingency, a group that I started years ago to encourage communities to take care of each other. That was the whole objective. Apparently, according to this FBI leak, the FBI, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, which I've worked with a lot throughout my military and contracting career, has designated me and my group, American Contingency, a terrorist organization? Yeah, that's right. They call it MVEs because they love acronyms. Militia Violent Extremist. Apparently American Contingency are a militia. A nationwide militia typically does things online, but also has a low history of violence. I don't even know what that means. I mean, what is low when it's zero? Like you're saying it's low, but I'm telling you it's none. So shouldn't it be zero? Like no history of violence? But you're saying low history of violence, like there's some violence that we incited or were part of, but I don't have that evidence, and I run it. It's my organization, AmericanContingency.com. You can go there. It's like a website and stuff. So the interesting thing about this document leaked by Project Veritas, which has been known to do these type of things, they expose truths of corruption, especially political corruption. The FBI is certainly a political action arm for whoever's in charge. It's been used that way since the origin of time. I've seen it happen personally when I was involved with targeting Abu Khatala, the guy responsible for going into Benghazi and killing 4 Americans, including an ambassador, including 2 global response staff officers. It bums me out that my own government that I worked for, intimately worked for, would target me and the community that we built together as domestic terrorists. On that same document, they talk about Ruby Ridge, talk about Waco. They talk about radical extremists in America, and we're lumped into that. Well, that's problematic for everything, right? I mean, why would you have a problem with that? Well, I don't know, because I understand how this works. Designation means authorization. What does that mean? Well, that means when the government designates you something, there's a task and purpose behind that. Typically, that starts with funding, task organization, and allocation of those funds to target you, to target me, which is very interesting because I've cooperated with the FBI when it came to militant human beings that were part of my organization that wanted to be part of a terrorist organization, but it wasn't us because we're not terrorists. To give you some highlights real quick, I started American Contingency because of the absence of first response in America when BLM and Antifa were burning down our communities. Yeah, those are real terrorists. Those are real domestic terrorist organizations. I said it, and I'll say it again. Black Lives Matter and Antifa should be domestic terrorist organizations. Well, why would you say that, Mike? Well, I fought terrorism and extremism my entire adult life. And I know.
All right, that's former Green Beret CIA contractor, Special Forces, Mike Glover. And he's talking about this document, how they put his organization's name on there and said that it had low levels of violence, which it has zero, none. What this is happening here is the DHS and the FBI are basically throwing this out there, putting information out there, like the two DHS bulletins, June 7th, 2022 and February 7th, 2022, which labels conspiracy theorists, disinformation, misinformation, propaganda artists. It goes out there and says, if you're talking about the stolen 2020 election, you're a domestic terrorist. If you're talking about COVID and vaccines as being bioweapons, you're a terrorist. And now the FBI is coming out with their own documentation. If you have a Gadsden flag, if you have a Punisher skull, if you have the Betsy Ross flag or any patriotic material, you can be labeled as a militia violent extremist. They label Ashley Babbitt as a martyr. Guys, this means that our own government is watching us, listening to us, and they are getting ready to do something to us. And this is where I go back to all this stuff that I've talked about before, Main Core, Directive 51, which authorizes through presidential directive Joe Biden through PEDS, Presidential Emergency Active Documents, to basically say, okay, there's a national or global emergency. It's affecting the United States of America. Who are the descendants? Who are the ones dissenting against America that we need to round up? Remember what they did to the Japanese during World War II? It's the same protocols. And they can come in and they can start taking out people they believe will be a threat to the contingency of government, like you, me, or any patriots that fall under this umbrella. This is incredibly concerning. I'm glad that the Senate is having hearings on this, talking about this. Ted Cruz is talking about this. But this is something that we need to be on red alert about. Nobody here is advocating violence. Nobody here is promoting violence or a revolution. What we're promoting is the revolution of ideas, the revolution of mind, people waking up to the atrocities that are occurring through government and the things that are happening through the perpetuation of government, and for the people to legally, lawfully, constitutionally take our rights and freedoms back through the process that has been laid in front of us by the founding fathers of this country. Now, what happens next? I don't know, but we all see it coming to that precipice moment. And that's the most important thing to understand, is that it has to come to this precipice moment, because that is the only time that Americans wake up and we can bring about promulgative change.
Yeah, change is right. And part of the wake up is for all those double boosted and double dose, and all those vaccinators still got some clot shot fog in their head, or they've been a little bit zombified, the pineal gland, or whatever it is. But all of us have to wake up. And it's probably going to shock Josh and I, even though we've been in this muck for 20 plus years. It's just whatever. Whatever it's going to be real. It's going to be ugly. And it's going to wake us the heck up. It's going to be the shock effect. We're going to take our quick commercial break. We'll come back with our featured guest, Robert Kraft, the philosopher and common law expert. Right back. Don't go away.
Government-induced inflation, taxes, rising interest rates, political instability. All of these can have a crushing effect on our investments, often causing the stock market to go down. But they can also cause gold and silver to go up.
Hi, this is Dr. Kirk Elliott. Buy gold, buy silver, buy now, but buyer beware. Precious metals companies are not created equal. As a PhD economist, I have been in the financial, economic, and precious metals business for 3 decades. The philosophy of my firm is people over profit. I encourage you to read my bio to learn more about me at kirkelliottphd.com.
Now is the time to own physical metals in an IRA, 401k, and outside of a retirement plan. Don't let the government destroy your hard-earned assets any longer. Call 720-605-3900 or visit kirkelliottphd.com.
Inflation is out of control. The price of gasoline has doubled in a very short time and interest rates are set to rise. How do you protect and grow your portfolio to make sure that you do not outlive your assets? Invest in annuities that have rate lock. Rate lock is an innovative new feature that allows you to lock in your rate of return at any time during the year to lock in these volatile upswings of the market. And unlike CDs and money market accounts, they accumulate tax deferred and can participate in the upside of market indexes. And they're probate free and they can provide income that you can't outlive. With all the different companies, features, indexes, and benefits which annuities offer, it can be confusing to choose which annuity is best for your unique situation. Let a company you can trust help you select a rate lock annuity that's right for you. Add an annuity to your retirement portfolio and start enjoying the many benefits that smart investors love. Call the Cleveland Insurance Group at 844-USA-2024. That's the Cleveland Insurance Group at 844-USA-2024. The Cleveland Insurance Group, 844-USA-2024.
Sexual material from schools filed by an Englewood man with no children in schools is going in front of a judge next week.
Yeah, this after some legal experts told us that this case would never see its day in court. SNN's Brianna Bosgert has the very latest in this lawsuit.
This is our money. These are taxpayer dollars that are being wasted.
Englewood resident Robert Kraft filed a motion demanding a trial by jury. He wants a jury to decide if the books in question should be allowed in public schools or not.
This is essentially a motion to skip all of the normal judicial processes.
Kraft says he's following Amendment 7 of the Bill of Rights, which states, in suits at common law where the value in controversy shall exceed $20, the right of trial by jury shall be preserved. DeLeo says there are procedures in place for parents to use if they have an issue with a book. They can fill out a form and the material in question is reviewed by a committee.
No one actually challenged those books in our process. This is the process mandated by our legislature, the Florida legislature. There is a process that the legislature has outlined. All 67 school districts must have this set of procedures.
That is not our place. That is not the people's place. Our place is at common law under the preamble, under our Bill of Rights.
A hearing is set for August 3rd for Judge Marianne Olson-Boehm to hear the two motions filed earlier this month.
So I've asked the questions because he's made this claim of wasting taxpayer money, and I totally agree. His presence is a waste of taxpayers' money.
Reporting in Sarasota County, Brianna Bosgert, SNN, the Suncoast News Network.
Robert, great to see you. I love it. So how did your court date on the 3rd of August, past Wednesday, how did it turn out?
We don't know yet. We're still waiting. I put the judge in a really tough spot. And the spot that I put her in is because I only stood on the preamble and I only stood on the Bill of Rights and I only stood on the Constitution of the state of Florida and I stood on the prevailing rights. And what happened was, as we got in there, they wanted to argue with me about procedure and they started quoting civil procedure. So there was a whole lot of objecting going on. And I was making my purchase points for appeal through my objections. And she proceeded through civil procedure, which is not us. And she actually cited, this is interesting, she cited a Florida state legislative law that was passed in 1969. And when she cited it, it said that all cases that come in civil will actually be done by civil procedure. And my response to her was, the 7th Amendment says that any fact determined by a trial by jury cannot be determined by any court of the United States except at the rules of common law. So are you saying that the Florida state legislature supersedes the 7th Amendment? And she didn't have a lot to say. So we went at it pretty good. We went round and round, but I think by the end, I gave her a good crack. My closing oration was pretty solid.
I love it. I love the $20 part of it. If a trial's more than $20, go ahead.
Yeah, that's interesting because they charged me $310 and I believe it's $310.50, which means that my controversy and my petition for grievance is $300.50. So that $300 is over $20, and it doesn't say. And this is interesting because this is the little word game that was being played in the courtroom. In the courtroom, she said she has to make a legal decision, and I reminded her that she's making a lawful decision, because the law is actually our Constitution and our Bill of Rights. Legal is legalese that falls under civil procedure, which falls under equity. And if you don't understand, and you really have to get into the layers of this thing to understand that there really are two systems, and I was pigeonholing her into her oath, and she's in a tough spot. It's been Wednesday, it's Saturday, it's Friday afternoon. We still don't have a ruling, and she's in a really tough spot.
Yeah, go ahead, Josh.
Well, I appreciate this, and can you give us a difference here, maybe, and explain the difference between common law and the legal proceedings, the civic proceedings? I think that when I go back to this and I studied it before in the past, is what we have basically the incorporation definitions when you start talking about Black Law's dictionary, and how the country itself, the Act of 1871, incorporated all these states and cities, started incorporating municipalities and so forth, and they started deriving basically what it is corporate law, very similar to corporate law, and mimicking these other common laws, bringing them in, but changing them in various points to where it undermines the actual human being and puts the human being in the state of a corporation enacting against another corporation. Is that kind of what we're dealing with here?
Yeah, that's correct. It's really interesting. So to elaborate on this, I'm going to make it real simple. So when we concept law, and we're talking about law versus legal, and we're splitting these things apart, what we have to do is we have to understand the concept in a physical presence. So let me lay it out, and I'll make it really simple. The reason they call it a docket is because you are at the dock. What happens at the dock is that the water meets the land. That's where you get on the ship and you head out to sea, or that's where you walk onto the territory of the land, which is what comes from our territory laws, which comes from America. So when we say the American people, what we're actually saying is the territorial American flesh people who give consent to the existence of the government of the United States of America. And this is something that came out in the hearing, and I made it very clear. The Constitution is a book. It is the book, and it has a binder, and it has a cover. That cover says "We the people." And when you open that cover, everything, the first line of that is your duties as an American person, capital P. When you get to the end of the book, you end at the 10th Amendment, and it says all things not given to the United States are redeemed or remanded to the state or the people. When you say the people at the end, the people are the Alpha and Omega. We allow the government to exist, we consent, or we object. And in my final oration, I looked around, I turned my hand, I said, this entire case is an objection to the poor behavior of public officers and agents who will be punished. And that is what this case is really about.
I love it. Yeah, and you don't have children in school, but what? So why did you jump into this arena?
Well, I guess I got lured into it. Someone had made a comment, and I didn't, and I read books most of the time. I don't really pay attention to the news. And someone had told me what was going on in Sarasota County, and I spend a lot of time, half my town's in Sarasota County. I went to Inglewood Elementary in Sarasota County. I spend money in Sarasota County all the time. And I ended up going up to this school board meeting, and I'm sitting there, and I was just in awe. I just couldn't believe the poor behavior, the accusations, the maneuvering, the tactical strategies that they were using to wage war on the people. And they were waging war. And that's something I told them yesterday. I told the attorneys when I looked at them. And that's another thing about this whole equity system versus the law system. And we have to really cut the line down this thing and say, we are talking about power that comes from the people, which is common law, or we are talking about money, and we are talking about equity, and we're talking about commercialization. And those are jurisdictional issues that have to be argued. And that's exactly what it was. So I got in there, and then when I saw their behavior, I went to speak one day, and they kicked everybody out. I got my rights violated. I got my First Amendment right violated. I wanted to speak. They were angry because they were basically getting the parents and the people there more angry. They're inciting an insurrection. They're ready for this thing to boil over, or they're just too stupid to realize what's actually happening.
Josh, what do you think about the insurrection of these school boards? Go ahead.
Well, you know what? When we start to look at the communist infiltration of this country, what they did is they started on a very, very local level, mayors, town boards, and school boards. And they started infiltrating these aspects of it because it's one of the things that the parents failed to notice. Parents usually never took place in the school boards or the town boards. And now when we're starting to see the effects on our children, our parents are going out there, and these school boards think that they rise above the people, which just isn't the case. I think that politicians need to be reminded that they sit below the people when it comes to law, that they are servants to the public. And the public, it doesn't matter if it's one individual like Robert or if it's a group of individuals and it's not all the constituents in the whole district, that one individual they serve. And they need to be reminded of that from time to time. And we know what happened in Virginia with exactly this. A.G. Garland went ahead and weaponized the FBI against these parents. And this reiterates exactly what we're talking about with the Department of Homeland Security, the weaponization of the FBI, labeling us people as terrorists. We already know that people out there who are claiming themselves to be sovereign citizens, or people who, like Robert, who study common law and going to the courts talking about the common law, that these people are being put on FBI watch lists because they're being viewed as domestic terrorists because it goes against the government's narrative. And that's just not right. And this is what I'm saying. We need to wake up to what's happening in this country.
Go ahead, Robert.
Yeah, I had my own head-to-head with the sheriff's office, when they started that crap with me. And the problem is, so one of the underlying premises that our forefathers gave us, when they gave us the Constitution and they wrote it in common law, the entire Constitution is written at common law, and so is the Bill of Rights, and so is the Declaration of Independence. And you got to remember that is common law. So when these clowns are trying to interpret through equity the actual law, they're in the wrong ballpark. They shouldn't even be talking about it. You should be talking about business. You should be talking about commerce. So this whole thing and their labels, these joke labels that they give people, who are you to label somebody? And that's the Seventh Amendment right there. See, these labels are accusations, and you have a right to defend your good name. Well, as soon as this common law system gets up and running, and as soon as this thing gets rolling, the FBI deemed you a domestic terrorist or whatever insanity they came up with to protect their hide. Well, fine. File a petition. Take them in under the Seventh Amendment, because that's where the facts are determined. See, we never knew this little trick. There is a premise in equity court, in attorney court, that anything that's interpreted at an attorney level is an opinion. But under the Seventh Amendment, facts are determined at common law in trial by jury. So if you get labeled, drag them in on a declaratory judgment of fact, put it in front of a jury, and if they didn't prove that that label's true, that's defamation of character, and you got them, and go after them. But you got to know how to do it. It's just a game, and we're playing. You got to get on the board.
It's great. We're going to take our last commercial break right now. We're going to come back with a 3-minute out of a 6-minute video from Robert Kraft on doing a common law thread on probably YouTube. We'll be right back and listen to the first 3 minutes of that video.
Hi, I'm My Patriot Supply. Preparedness is my thing.
Our most popular kit sold out in just 3 days.
Oh, that's great, but you're a preparedness company.
A marketing company.
A preparedness company. Shouldn't you have been a little better prepared?
One day, my friend. One day.
One day what?
Soon you'll learn that one of the best tactics in marketing is scarcity. There's no better sales trick.
But you're a preparedness
marketing.
Okay, a marketing company in a preparedness business who openly advertises how many times you haven't been prepared. It's the very definition of irony.
When you're as popular as we are, you sell out. Don't worry, one day you'll sell out too.
No, we won't, because we're a real preparedness company and we take nothing more serious than having things in stock. We're reliable, and that's why My Patriot Supply is the industry leader in emergency preparedness.
True genius is never recognized in its time.
Stand out from the status quo. Let them know you're a patriot with the Patriot Pin. We feature an entire line of 14-karat gold-plated pins, starting at $4.45. Challenge coins, only $17.45 each. And decals, only $6.45 each. Order now and get a free gift at thepatriotpin.com.
What's up, everybody? So we're going to start a series on common law. The reason we're going to do this is because, I don't know if you guys know, there's a case going on, or it's actually called an action at law going on in Sarasota County, Florida. There's a hearing on August 3rd, 2022. I am the petitioner, and I'm suing Sarasota County School Board for the sexually explicit books and to convene a grand jury to prosecute the Board of County Commission, or the commissioners or the school board members, for inciting an insurrection, as well as child neglect and some other things. But I want to talk about common law because a friend of mine said this to me today. There's people that are getting in protests together, and this is kind of a big deal, and I'm not really a big deal kind of guy. I kind of like my books and really to be left alone. But he said, you realize this is the first actual common law case to enter a Florida courtroom in 70 years. And that kind of hit home. And he's right. So in this journey that I've gone through, what we never learned is there are actually two legal systems. There is a justice system and there is a equity system. The justice system is the people's system, and that system works off of the preamble of the Constitution of the United States of America, and it works off the Bill of Rights. These are two different documents, and don't ever forget that. Okay, and it works off of your state constitution preamble and the prevailing rights that are in there. And there's rights in there where it says you have the right to trial by jury. You have the right to petition for your government. Petition your government. Well, that means to make a complaint. And this is where common law gets convoluted. I'm going to use the Bill of Rights because I'm most familiar with that, and the preamble of the Constitution. So the preamble of the Constitution are the citizen duties to form a more perfect union, to ensure domestic tranquility, to provide for the common defense. Notice that the word common defense is not common defense as in defense SE, but defense CE at the end. The reason is because it is the commoner's defense. See, normal people, and I say normal, I mean people who aren't attorneys or politicians or rich, right? The everyday working American, an American.
That's a great video. You've got to continue. First case in 7 years. That's a big deal. You know, in law school, they don't teach you about common law, right? It's all about the bar association, the incorporation, the equities you talk about, right? And it's just no different than medical school. They don't teach you about vaccines. They don't teach you about the VAERS system of vaccine injury to CDC. A lot of pediatricians who've been in the business 20 years never heard of VAERS until COVID. It is shocking, but they put blindfolds on to different students, law and medical, in order to keep them, blind to the reality of these different systems. And that's how they've been controlling us in their matrix for the last 100 years plus. Go ahead, Robert.
Yeah, you're exactly correct. By dividing, and really this is a philosophical concept, when when you talk about Socrates or Plato or Aristotle wrote books across the board. I mean, books on categories, on animals, on law theory, on rhetoric, and he's the one who taught Alexander the Great. He was Alexander the Great's teacher. And really, when you get into it and you start looking, it was not about dividing specialties. It was about converging knowledge and seeing the relationships between these things. So these individual identities have caused us to actually degrade our system, because you can't bring anything else into it. And you're going to need to bring other parts of your life into this system to bring it back online, because it's really about an encompassing mind and different exploratory places that you can go to. And the school systems are specifically designed. I want to say something else that's interesting. You made a great point. Law schools don't teach this law. That's because you were not allowed to graduate 12th grade without having a public debate in 1700, and you were already supposed to be a common law lawyer or pretty close.
Wow. Go ahead, Josh.
Well, Robert, this is interesting. So this has been a big part of study of my life as well. And one thing that I noticed is really that anything after the 10th Amendment should be null and void within the United States Constitution. And the two biggest points that I bring about this are the 13th and the 14th Amendment. And I'm not talking about the true 13th Amendment, but the one that abolishes slavery. Because in actuality, it does anything but abolish slavery. If we look at the definitions of words and how legalese actually operates, the 13th Amendment talks about neither slavery nor involuntary servitude shall be used as a form of punishment. But what we don't look at is what it's actually saying, and that's the reverse of those words. And really what it's declaring is that people can exist in two states of existence in the United States of America. They can exist in a state of freedom, which is the opposition of freedom, or of slavery, or they can exist in a state of voluntary servitude, which is the opposite of involuntary servitude. Now, a state of voluntary servitude is contractual law. And it's really interesting how they timed these in the 1800s, because the next amendment that came in was the 14th Amendment. And the 14th Amendment says that all persons born in the United States shall be citizens of the United States and fall under the jurisdiction of those states respectively, and have the privileges and immunities of those states. Now, the word persons there defined in the 14th Amendment is the Black's Law legal definition of persons in 1883, which is a corporation, a legal entity. And it differs from the definition of person in the 4th Amendment, where all people can be secure in their person. And this is one thing that we have to understand, is the 13th and the 14th Amendment really, through this legalese, enslaved Americans under this system of injustice. What are your thoughts?
Well, it's interesting you say that. I've done quite a bit of research, and what I found out was you can't even activate the 14th Amendment under U.S. Code until you activate under U.S. Code 1983. And you can go look at the case law. Until you activate your First Amendment under the freedom of speech, this 14th Amendment does not get activated, which is a very interesting thing, because U.S. Code 1983, and when you cite the cases, that's exactly what it says. It is a secondary activator. So you must be in the flesh before you can be the corporation, and that's how it's structured. They didn't tell us that. They didn't tell us that part. And this is all about obfuscation. Keep the information away from them. I've been working on a new definition for person, because we're going to have to redefine some of these terms. And I'll read it to you. I actually have been working on it for the last couple of days. So it takes a little bit of Aristotle, a little bit of John Locke, a little bit of American Heart Association, and I guess a little bit of Bob Kraft. It says person of the people. Oh, hold on. It is pertinent to declare to the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution of the United States of America, the Bill of Rights, the law and legal premise. Person of the people, of we the people. A carbon dioxide emitting single entity fleshly sleeve biped with the ability to do all of the following: speak words, do arithmetic, basic mathematics, gain knowledge, and withstand an examination of opinion to determine a reasonable fact. So I think that breaks off any legal entity that we can come across, and we can redefine and just stand on that. Aristotle called us bipeds. We're going to go with it.
I like it. Let me just weigh in for the audience. Dave Shostokis, who's on my show a couple of weeks ago, is the constitutional expert. So I asked him, all right, what it really is the rights of Americans? He said, well, Declaration of Independence is a spirit of the free America, right, the Republic. He says the Constitution is the execution of that spirit, of that, freedom, right? He said that only the first 10 amendments are part of the Constitution, 1 through 10. So when you start drifting to 13 to 14, like Josh and Robert were talking about, you're not really in the beginning of the actual Constitution. You're now kind of out of it. And so when Robert cites the First Amendment to activate the 14th, he's absolutely right. Go ahead, Robert.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And it really is. We have to start looking at this. Why would they do this? And these words like declaration, constitution, and this actually came up in my hearing yesterday when in my final oration, I laid out that this whole thing's about power. And I told him in Federalist Paper 84, Alexander Hamilton specifically said they don't need a Bill of Rights because they have a preamble. And Thomas Paine and Patrick Henry said, no way. Governments have committed the worst atrocities and sins in humankind for as long as we can live. Government is Satan himself. We want a Bill of Rights. We want rights, and we want them written down, and they are inalienable. So what they did is they played wordsmith, and I wrote that in one of the letters to the lawyer. I grow weary of your wordsmithing. Stop playing word games with me because I don't play those games.
Love it. Go ahead, Josh.
Well, and this is beautiful because I think that what you were saying before is people back in those days, in order to graduate high school, would have to go up for a level of debate. There's we have to understand that the times during that time, right, is that farmers, most people were farmers. They lived very, very far away from the center of town. And what they would do is they would get a power of attorney, an attorney to represent them. And that was known as the representation of your person. And that attorney would take that representation of your person, go in town, take care of your affairs. And this is kind of where representative form of government actually came from the same idea. But you know what? Our founding fathers understood this, and they wrote it into, like you said, common law. And this is what the Constitution is all about, is we are supposed to remember what this was about. We are supposed to learn and educate ourselves what this is all about and hold this true to ourselves. Because if we don't hold on to our freedom, if we don't preserve the knowledge of where our freedom is derived from God, and then declared it in the Declaration and then constituted it in the Constitution, then we'll lose those freedoms and liberties. And that's exactly what's happened. And in the United States, a degradation over the last 150 years of all of those things. And that's why we're in this position we're in today.
According to our Constitution, it says that the president is the head of the military. Actually, it doesn't say that. What it says is Congress is the head of the military until there's a declaration of war. And then the president is called to be the head of the military. So here's the question. If Congress must declare war to make the president the commander-in-chief of the military by our Constitution, it's written, you can go read it, and he pulled it out and he was in shock, then how did Abraham Lincoln raise 75,000 troops on a proclamation without the authority of Congress to declare war when the South seceded? Or were we a fraternity of states? And was there something else going on? And my research says something else was going on. It wasn't about slavery. It was about money.
I love it.
It was about agriculture, to the ships, to the shores. It's all written down. I have the governor's message. Florida governor committed suicide right around April 1st, 1865, 2 weeks before the quote unquote gentleman's agreement at Appomattox. Okay.
Yeah.
And in that letter, it specifically says Abraham Lincoln was a tyrant, and Abraham Lincoln declared war, and we are a country that is a republic, and we are a fraternity. That's why only 9 of 13 states had to ratify. You didn't need 100%. He declared war, and the republic fell that moment. And we've been trying to figure out what happened. So now we're going to get it back.
That's interesting. If you go look at the 1871 Act, which was, paying the reparations after Lincoln was assassinated to England, right? You were under You win the war, and then all the spoils go over to England, right? That allowed for the taxation system to come in, Federal Reserve, right? Because they declared Washington, D.C., the District of Columbia, port, right? That's how they came into us. And they've controlled us ever since. That was like basically in 1871, kind of the beginning of the matrix of the modern world. Your thoughts,
Well, it
Robert?
started in 1860s, actually. Well, exactly what Robert was saying right here is we had farm equipment coming over from England into the United States, into the north, and they were switching this farm equipment out. Now, how were they buying it? They were taking out loans from the Bank of England, from a centralized bank. And Lincoln saw this, and he saw massive opportunity here, and he started collaborating with England, with the central banks over there, taking loans out to buy this farm equipment in the north, and ordered the South to end slavery immediately and start taking out these same loans. The South came back and said, that's not happening. You got to give us a transitionary period, and we're not taking out loans from England. And that's how one of the aspects of the Civil War that came about, that is Thomas De Lorenzo wrote a great book called The Real Lincoln, where all of this is in there, and it shows what the Civil War was actually about, how Lincoln and them actually hijacked the Republican Party, the anti-slavery party, and utilized it. They were modern-day Democrats, really, who Lincoln was, and they hijacked this to basically bring in central bankers and foreign loans into the United States of America.
Yeah,
ahead,
exactly. You want to read an interesting book. You know, both sides are supposed to get to tell the tale, right? That's how this works. Well, Lincoln's boys have been able to tell their story. You should go read a book called The Rise and Fall of the Confederate Government by Jefferson Davis. There's a whole lot of facts in there that are verifiable. Not only are they verifiable, he sent you to places and said, go look at this, go look at this, go look at this. And his story lines up. And it lines up with our Florida governor that commits suicide. You got to remember, after the war, 30 days after the war, Jefferson Davis was arrested, never tried. John Wilkes Booth, whoever, never tried. Okay, none of these people were ever tried. There were no facts. There was nothing brought into a court. We were supposed to be a republic. What happened to the republic? What happened to the rule of law? Nothing. Nothing happened. They pulled out all of our senators, all of our representatives, our governor. They pulled out our lieutenant governor that took over after the Florida governor committed suicide around April 1st, and they arrested him, and then they appointed their posse, just like they're doing in our elections right now. They serve up their little minion, and we have to elect them because that's who it is. Well, that crap's going to end. We're just going to start putting them in jail.
Now, did that Florida governor commit suicide by 2 musket shots to the chest? I'm just curious.
No. He did it. He wrote it.
Yeah.
He said, I would rather be dead than reunite with Lincoln and his union.
Didn't know if the Clintons existed back then or not.
There's always been a Clinton somewhere.
Unfortunately. Robert, we got about a minute and a half left. Close out the show. You've been terrific. I'm going to follow up with an article once you get a verdict back from the judge. Go ahead. Where can people find you?
I'm going to say I got my website up. It's going to be ourunitedrepublic.com. It's almost up. I'm hoping to be up in about a week. And I've been spending all day working on it. But here I'm going to close it out with what I said to Judge Boehm as my final words. If you dismiss this case, the Republic has fallen. And that's where we are.
Yep. Go ahead, Josh. 30 seconds.
I'm in complete agreement. You know what? A lot of the stuff that happened in the mid 1800s has brought about what's happening today, the bringing into the Federal Reserve Bank and the corruption of this country through what's known as admiralty law that modeled into UCC, Universal Commercial Code, into corporate law, which is now being enacted onto the people. And if people don't stand up for their true rights, for the rights that were guaranteed to us by our Creator, the Republic definitely has fallen. And I think that we're very, very close to declaring that and understanding that people need to regain and retain the power of the government back to the people, as mentioned in the Declaration.
Right. We the people. Thank you very much, Robert. Have a great weekend. Josh, you too. I got Tony Lyons, the publisher, Skyros Publishing, you know, the publishing of the book, The Plague, Judy Mikovits, all 3 of her books. Oh, Robert F. Kennedy is the real Fauci. I got Tony Lyons in the house on Monday. Going to watch the show. Have a great weekend, everybody. James Grumnick signing off.